The time to build is upon us.
With great power comes great responsibility.
You know the greatest danger facing us is ourselves. An irrational fear of the unknown.
Not because they are easy, but because they are hard.
This is the Superhuman Academy podcast.
Well, I am glad to be reconnecting. I remember last time we talked, you told me about how you were, I think doctors classified you as the real life Wolverine, right?
Yeah, that was, one of the nurses had said that when I was in the ICU, and then a physical therapist during my recovery. Yeah, so it was great for my ego, man. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, so I already have heard a little bit of your story, but just so other people who might listen to this have some context, do you mind kind of sharing the 30,000 foot view?
Yeah, not at all. So I've been a personal trainer / coach, honestly, whatever you want to call me, since professionally doing that since 2001. Working in big box gyms initially, and then branched out on my own. I was very fortunate early in my career. At that time there was everybody was standing on top of Bosu balls. CrossFit was kind of first becoming a thing. I was very fortunate to have some mentors early in my career that taught me like the truth about just strength and conditioning, what that is. If people wanted whatever they want to do, if they want to stand on top of Bosu balls and do, what we used to call the circus stuff, help them do that in a safe manner, but make sure you're training them for their sport. And for most people, that is the sport of life. For busy parents and professionals, it is being able to be capable and engage with your parents and I'm sorry, turning on my do not disturb here. I thought I already had that done.
Yeah, you're good.
Engage with your kids as an empowered parent, and basic strength conditioning, the same principles that a professional athlete would apply, help the everyday athlete do that. So I came up with my 3-goal system of have the aesthetic goal, which ultimately becomes a side effect. So what do you want your body to look like? Have the lifetime or legacy goal, which I say is what type of old person do you want to be? And then the one that connects those two is the empowering goal. So in the next 3 to 12 months, what is it that you want to do better? Or even just what sport do you want to be able to perform well in? For me, that was boxing. So I trained for pound strength, agility, speed, and that idea of pound for pound strength, everybody thinks about the amount of weight you can move, which is of course part of it, but it does build long-term resilience, which is injury resistance, which came in very handy in 2017. My wife and I that year decided we were going to start a family. We'd been together for, since like 2004, around there. Got married in 2011. So we're late bloomers, so to speak, right?
Mm-hmm.
We're having our issues with that, so it was already a challenging year, but then had turned 40 July of that year. And then November 19th, 2017, was just training in some CrossFit gyms downtown. The workout of the day was heavy squats, heavy singles, and then a workout called Power Elizabeth. I worked up to 405 in my squats. And then I at 40 years old, outperformed all the 20 somethings, the guys half my age in that gym. So it was arguably in some of the best shape of my life. That was November 19th, 2017. November 20th, 2017, loading my dog into the back of my Jeep to take her to her chemo treatment. Some kid came along, high off his ass, and hit me, pinned me between the front of his truck and the back of my Jeep, crushing my right leg. I still have the rear bumper off that Jeep up in my garage. It's got my leg print in it. So the next day, November 21st, 2017, my workout was taking 10 steps with a walker. That's the 30,000 foot view of it there.
Yeah. And then you said, I think last time we spoke, you talked about how you had an unexpected recovery path from there.
Yeah. Well, when we talk about, I mentioned resilience. So before we to fully talk about that recovery. Resilience is the ability to withstand impact or trauma, or however you want to fare it better than most, and then also recover on the better than average. So when the plan for that day was, again, I take my my dog to her chemo treatment, drop her off. I have a couple of appointments I have to get to, and then my wife was working in Austin that day, so she was going to drive back and pick Piggy up. Piggy was our dog. Pick Piggy up from the vet, and then we, have a nice relaxing evening. So obviously that plan got altered. As I was laying there on the street, I told everybody to quiet down. I knew I needed to call her and tell her there was a change of plans. I didn't want her driving back from Austin. That's like, over an hour drive, stressed out.
Are you calling her from the concrete? Like, where are you making
laying on the street? Yeah. Okay. Laying on the street. I sat up. I was like, everybody, I was very fortunate. A bunch of people came over to help. I was like, please quiet down. I have to call my wife. And so I called her and I said, hey babe, I was in an accident. So I'm not going to be able to take Piggy to the vet. I'll put her in the condo. Just come back home and we'll figure out. She was like, okay, take it easy on the other guy. And, said, we'll talk to you later. So then, the paramedics come, they load me in the ambulance, and they were like, you do want something for the pain. Now, I don't know how many Marines you know, but I was in the Marine Corps in the late 90s. As an infantry Marine, got to work in special operations. The standard joke is anything hurts, drink Motrin, take water, right? Right. The joke, drink Motrin, take water. They just shove painkillers in your face. So very early on, I developed this mantra of, I don't take painkillers because I want them to work when I need them. That was just my automatic reply. So the paramedic is like, hey, do you want us to give you something for the pain? And I said, I don't take that stuff. I want it to work when I need it. And they looked at each other and kind of chuckled. He was like, hey man, I think this is when you need it. And I was like, yeah, you're right. So I don't know what they gave me. They gave me something. And then he said, okay, I'm going to use your phone, call your wife and tell her where we're taking you. And I was, getting lightheaded as he's explaining that. And I tried to be like, okay, just don't tell her. And I don't remember. But then he called her. And I still have trouble telling this part of the story, Collin, so forgive me. She saw the number come up, my phone number, and so she probably answered like, hey, babe. And then she hears another guy's voice, and he says, hey, this is the paramedic. We're taking your husband to University Medical. His leg and his hip were broken, because that's what they assessed from the accident scene. So meet us just come in the ER, tell them who you are, tell them who you're here for, and yeah. So, so she had to drive back knowing that. But then I got to the ER, and they assessed me, and no breaks. So, severe crush syndrome to all the muscles in the right leg, compartment syndrome, torn MCL, 3 severe bone bruises, but no breaks. So one of the points I really like to drive home is that Mark Ripto, if you're familiar with him, and a old strength conditioning coach, has this great quote that stronger people are harder to kill and more useful in general. And another one is everybody can benefit from being a little bit stronger. I don't know if that's Mark or not, but both those statements are very true. So the act of strength conditioning, what I say, get strong and do stuff for the everyday athlete. Mm-hmm. It makes you more resilient in that impact and trauma will be less effective in hurting you, in injuring you, in lessening your capability. And it gives you a greater platform for recovery. So when I was in the ICU, I was in there for a week. One of the nurses in the ICU was a member at one of the CrossFit gyms that I trained at. And if you know anything about CrossFitters, they will tell you why you should do CrossFit every chance they get, right?
Yeah,
So
right.
he was saying, guys, this is one of the coaches there. This is why you need to come in. It makes you harder to kill, more useful in general. And he's right? And they're very enthusiastic about that, as they should be. Intelligently followed CrossFit is a great methodology to apply. So yeah, that was in there. I earned the first time I heard a real life Wolverine quote, and that was again great for my ego. But then in the recovery, heading into the recovery, had the doctor in charge of the ICU come in, and I understand she was well intended. She said, "Mr. Mancini," she heard the nurse talking about everything and the workout I'd done the day prior. She said, "I understand. I need you to understand your exercise and health history have helped you fare this accident better than most. There's a certain percentage of the population that would have lost their leg. The vast majority would have had breaks. It might have killed some people. You fared it better than most, and you will recover better than most, but you need to understand going back into your life, those days of exercising like that are behind you." And I said, "Who is in charge of my health care?" The look on her face told me she instantly thought I was asking, "Where's the man in charge?"
Mm-hmm.
And she's justified in not having any statements like that made to her, but that wasn't my intent. She said, "I'm in charge of your healthcare. Are you okay with that?" I said, "No, ma'am, you're not. You are a consultant. I am in charge of my healthcare. I will squat 405 again." And it took me 16 months to get back to that. So then through the injury rehab, going to physical therapy, one of the physical therapists made a similar comment about being a real life Wolverine because of the speed with which I was recovering. But I dug into so much research about how to expedite recovery, largely through two sources, Charles Poliquin and Rhonda Patrick, who were just at the time putting out some great content on that.
Mm-hmm. I want to dig into more of your life, but I'm interested, since you just threw out that tidbit, if you're going to share, like, what were the key things that allowed you to expedite your recovery? Because squatting 405 16 months after being pinned between two vehicles is not something I don't think many people can claim that. What were the key things that you did differently from most people?
First off, I want to most people shouldn't shoot to claim that, because that means they would have to go get pinned.
Yeah,
I'm
don't
glad I got
recommend that.
right. I'm glad I got to prove my methods are effective. I would not have chosen this route if I had my choice. It's I'm often asked, what is the best pre-workout? And it sounds snarky, it sounds sarcastic, it sounds smartass, but my first answer to that is always the best pre-workout is a worthy goal. Because why do you take a pre-workout? Well, you're tired, your energy's low. Well, why is that the case? Well, because you didn't plan your meals, so you went to the vending machine, or you got Uber Eats, or you went through the drive-through and got, whatever was convenient,
Mm-hmm.
and you're tired. Why is that? Well, did you get to bed at a decent hour? Or do you have a bedtime routine? Or are you doom scrolling like the last 2 hours a day, laying in bed when you should be lights out, cool room, maybe some white noise on, getting some sleep, right? Because if the goal is worthy to you, if it is important enough to you, you will prioritize that stuff, right? You are not stronger at the end of your workout.
Mm-hmm.
You are, in fact, weaker, deconditioned, broken down at the end of your workout. It's during the recovery period, assuming you rest fully and recover through nutrition and proper supplementation well. It's during the recovery period when you get stronger.
Mm-hmm.
So I had an extended recovery period after that accident, because it was, trauma to the leg. There were every muscle fiber in my leg was exploded. So I could not have, for the first week, and then, less and less so progressively on past that, I couldn't have my leg below my hip, because there was nothing to hold the blood going down there. So it just felt like it was going to explode. extremely painful, right? So, like I said, the 21st, 10 steps with the walker, and then get back down, get that leg up. So it sucked taking those 10 steps. It sucked worse than any workout I'd ever done. But that was the literal and figurative next step that I had to do. I was never, in the Marine Corps, especially in the infantry, especially in special operations, you're going to run. Like you need to have your conditioning up. So you're going to run. So I was never a fan of running. I never wanted to run. I did it. But then when I couldn't walk, man, did I want to fucking run.
Mm-hmm.
You don't mind the occasional F-bomb?
Oh, say whatever you want.
Okay.
I don't.
Cool.
Yeah.
Just wanted to make sure of that.
You're good.
Should have asked that before we started recording, but all right. So it's checking off the boxes. It sounds so cliche. It sounds so simple. It sounds dumb. I get it. Everybody wants this like big, amazing, insightful answer. Check the fucking box every day, right? The days you don't want to, those are the ones that count the most. When you're motivated, when you're like, oh, everything's going great. I can't wait to get to the gym and get a workout. That day counts the least because you're going to get in there. Even if like you hit every red light or there's traffic, like you're going to go in there and get it done, even if you only get 10 minutes. The day you don't want to, even if you only get 10 minutes, it's infinitely better than doing nothing. And that's the day that counts the most because that's going to make the difference between do you progress or do you stay the same? So I wish I had a better, sexier answer for you, Collin, but check the box.
Yeah, well, what you're saying, this is a mental shift I had a while ago, which was I never work out anymore. I only train. And that was I got to clap for that. Cool.
Dude, that's it, right?
Yeah.
Working out is something you go through.
Yeah.
Training is something you're working toward, right? It's the I've heard it put recently, the pursuit of pleasure versus the pleasure of pursuit.
Yeah. Yeah, I like that. Yeah, so I never work out, I only train. And I also, the way that I see my physical training, I do jujitsu, so I train 4, sometimes more or less times a week. But when I wake up, early in the morning to go train, I've started to shift my thinking as well. This isn't just it's not just physical training. I do have physical goals that I'm working towards, but it's mental training. And so if there's a day where I wake up and I'm like, oh man, I don't want to go this morning. It's like, okay, great. Here's my opportunity for the mental training. And if I go in and I just get smashed the entire hour, which happens sometimes, then, well, there's more opportunity for the mental training. Like I'm building the ability to get smashed for an hour when I didn't even want to get up that morning and get out of bed and do it anyway. And I'm one day better than I was before. And so, yeah, I've seen that, like that shift from working out because I'm supposed to I'm training. I have an objective. I have a reason for doing this. I've articulated it, and it's not just physical. It's mental. It's holistic. It's my whole life that I'm working towards.
That's beautiful, man. I love it.
Yeah. I have 3. Did you have another comment on that?
I was just gonna. I totally agree. Like I said, boxing was my sport. I still hit a bag when I can. I rarely get the chance to spar, but I do occasionally get a chance to roll with some jiu-jitsu guys.
Nice.
I am by no means a practitioner, but I went to this event last year and they had a jiu-jitsu day, and I'm about 210 pounds. Yeah. I got paired with this guy, Trevor, who I've become good friends with, who's like 150, and he's blue or purple belt. I can't remember. But man, just for 90 minutes, he worked me like I had no control, And then last week I was at another event, and we did a jiu-jitsu day, and I got paired against a guy who's a bit of a beginner, a little more skilled in it than I am, but he's like 270. And I was happy I was able to keep him at bay, just a big dude. And yeah, it's such an amazing art form.
Yeah. There's always somebody out there who can manhandle you.
Yeah, yeah, and it was the guy I
Yeah.
outweighed, not
Yeah,
the,
right. Yeah.
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 Again, he was basically folding my clothes with me in them. Yeah.
Yeah, that's what do I say? Yeah, that's what jujitsu is, learning how to fold clothes with people still in them. Yeah. So I have kind of 3 different possible paths that I'd like to travel so that we can go whichever way seems most interesting to you, and we'll see if I can remember them all. So one of them was the you mentioned starting late with starting a family, and I sense a story there. Another one was you got emotional when talking about the call to your wife being made from the paramedic, and I found it interesting to see that empathy and emotion still there, as I think that oftentimes when I interact with what I'd say is like manly men, right? Guy, like your whole thing is get strong and do stuff, right? Like
Yeah.
that's something that I think most people would expect to hear from somebody who's shut off to their emotions, and I don't see that in you. And then, let's see, what was the last one related to that? Oh, yeah, I don't have a super clear question here, but you were in the military, and one thing I've noticed with a lot of military people is sometimes they come back and feel lost. And, I got a sense that you'd found a path forward from that. So there's 3 different directions. Take it where you will.
Man, they're all the same. I mean, I do so let's hit them in reverse real quick. I do feel the veteran community, it needs to find purpose when they get out, right? The the reason I went to boot camp 4 days after graduating high school, and it was because I needed to get out of my hometown. It wasn't that there wasn't any opportunity there, right? It wasn't this, plethora of opportunity for sure, but of course there's opportunity everywhere. I wasn't able to see it, so we can go back to my childhood, which I think that's where we'll probably end up starting. So that summer I was away at boot camp. Everybody was saying, "Enjoy your summer, don't go yet." That summer I was away, I had friends in one of 2 categories. They died or they went to jail, and I would have been in one of those, right?
Mhm.
Um, the uh, the emotional response with my wife, I'm insanely lucky to have the woman by my side that I do. I that's it. I am. We've when we started dating, we both said we weren't gonna marry, we weren't gonna have kids. That was like again early mid 2000s. We got married in 2011. And then we won't have kids. We'll just travel. We'll build businesses. We'll do all that. And then around the same time, we were like, hey, let's bring some kids in this world. And then, with each progression of our relationship, and I'm sure this is, you've got instances of this with every aspect of life. When you go after someone, you decide you want something and you go after it, like you get tested, right?
Mhm.
So we didn't have the easiest time there, but if we want to, the reason why we were late bloomers, as I said it, yeah. So this past weekend, the event I was at, I actually spoke at it, and my presentation was on restoring masculine strength. And um, so the way I kicked it off was I told the story of 2 11-year-old boys, and let's just go in there. So the first, in 1940, Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, an 11-year-old boy climbs into a delivery truck. He was tasked with bringing some money into the house, right? His family was not able to live on what the money his dad was bringing in. So he had to go out and find odd jobs to bring them in. So one day he was paid at 11 years old to drive a delivery truck 260 miles round trip from Pittsburgh to Cleveland and back. Not because it was cool, not because He wanted to impress his friends, but he was given an objective to do. Not even just go do this specifically. Hey, get this, make this happen, however you do it, right? And that was my grandfather, Richard Mancini. And it's not like he was alone in that. Those post-Depression years and the years leading into World War II were the soil that birthed the greatest generation, as it's been called, right? So in that era, there's 12-year-olds working in factories and fields, and 14-year-olds changing their documents to join the military, and 16-year-olds are head of household sometimes. So they were doing it because they became the greatest generation because it's what the world demanded of them, right? That was 1940. So now fast forward 48 years later, 1988, another 11-year-old boy was labeled as troubled. A doctor determined that the right place for him was St. Francis Ward for Troubled Teens, and went in there. And that was me. So the thing in there was you would have different classes and activities that were all about integrating, how to not be troublesome, if I were to abbreviate it, right? And then in the evenings, there were social hours. Well, at 11, those troubled 15 and 16-year-olds were scary as fuck to me. So I didn't want to come out of my room. And then the doctors there, the proper treatment they thought for an 11-year-old who didn't want to come out of his room was solitary confinement. So 48 years apart, same bloodline, drastically different outcomes, right? So, who I was an 11-year-old boy that could have used some attention and direction from his dad, right? If we're going to be just plain and blunt about it. And the story doesn't end there, obviously, right? So when I came out of there, my grandfather Richard and his wife, my grandmother Patsy, took me in, right? So these people that were heading into retirement decided to take on the trouble that no one could handle, right? But isn't that, again, why they earned the moniker of the greatest generation? So, then it was just a different experience. For the first time, I had just a model of what masculinity is. And let me be clear, I was by no means an angel through my teenage years, right? I got into my fair share of trouble. But even in that, when you're 14 and you're bitching about having to cut the grass, remember how I talked about 14-year-olds change their documents to join the military? Well, that was my grandfather. At 14 years old, he was a machine gunner in World War II in Okinawa, right?
Wow.
So that shut me up real quick. That I went ahead and got out there and cut the grass, right? And then I just, I started to see the difference between a man and a boy who'd grown up, right? You notice that stark difference.
Yeah.
And so I wanted to, this seemed fun, sure, but you just see they're paper thin, right? They're full of shit. There's nothing there. They're not dependable. And I had a teacher, I will never say this teacher's name because I think he would get crucified today, but I joined this elective course, and I had a teacher that had some of the seniors stand up in front of us, the sophomores, and say, welcome to this course. I want you guys to understand where you are. You're in the right place. You can grow a lot here. You can learn a lot here. I want you to introduce you to some seniors. These guys are moving into the third year of this course. These guys are men. And to let you guys know where you stand, you are lower than whale shit. And that sits at the bottom of the ocean. Now, you show up here, you do the work, you work hard, you learn. You may crawl out of that ocean onto the shore and someday be something resembling these men here. But again, you are not there right now, lower than whale shit at the bottom of the ocean. We all sat there like, what? No one had ever talked to us before like that.
Yeah.
But at the same time, it was like, man, somebody had just laid out the blueprint of like the lessons that were being spelled out, like at the kitchen table that my grandfather was teaching me, or that the behind that mower, like pushing it, just thinking about how to get this done as efficiently as possible, how to make myself more efficient, more useful, to be of service, to be dependable. So, yeah, I wanted more of that. And again, there were some opportunities moving through that course, but I got to hear a lot of stories about my grandfather and his time in the Marine Corps, and I wanted to see the world. I wanted to get out of Western Pennsylvania, so that's what I did. I enlisted. I got the chance to try for a special operations group out of Norfolk, Virginia, a fast company. Through the late 90s, I walked the earth with some of the baddest men on the planet at the time. I'm still in touch with a lot of them, and they are amazing, amazing influences in my life. Yeah.
So, okay, so the 3 paths there. You said that they were all the same thing, so I don't know if I caught the same thing, so I wanna hear it.
So,
Yeah, the
s-
d do you want me to reiterate, or
yeah,
you got 'em in
please
your
do.
head?
Please
Okay,
do.
okay, so the ones in my head, so people coming back from the military feeling lost, the emotion that you displayed, and waiting to have kids
Mhm.
were kinda the 3 paths. So what's the unifying factor?
So the foundation in there was, you know, eh, I didn't get it all at once. Of course
Mhm.
not, right? But it's just it's learning what you don't know and wanting to learn it and pursuing it, and the path of self-improvement. So I did my first 2 years with the Special Operations Group in Norfolk, and then I went to the Fleet, which is like a standard infantry unit.
Mhm.
Um, Went to the Middle East with FAST, went to Japan with Kilo 32. And then in there, in the Marine Corps, we had this saying where there's always that 10%, right? So there's always that 10% that is like, performing well. There's always that 10% that's kind of performing at the low end. So at the same principle, I wanted to gravitate toward the top performance. Like I wanted to be with those guys. I want
Yeah.
guys who are looking to get better, who want feedback on how to get better, and willing to give feedback on how I get better. So that's who and side note, like I said, I'm in touch with those guys. I'm on a text chain with some of those guys that I haven't seen in decades. I do get to see some of them periodically. Those guys were on the phone with my wife, some of them who had never even met her after my accident, before some of my family members. So those guys just have a special place in my heart
Mhm.
they just have a special place in my heart. Um, so when I was with 3-2, I had some fantastic leadership throughout, especially in fast, because you don't get in a unit like that on every level unless you're top notch. The Fleet, sometimes you would get. I again had some great leadership on the platoon and the company level. I, for the first time there, experienced some really selfish higher up leadership, and won't get into the details with that. I got out with an honorable discharge and all that, but there were just some towards the end of my first 4 years of enlistment, there were some issues that came up that had me questioning: is it best for me to stay in the Marines?
Mhm.
So I got out. Um, and I remember feeling lost when I got
Mhm.
out. Joined the Didn't want to go back to Pittsburgh. I had a buddy I served with who didn't want to go back to his hometown. A couple of us actually landed in Norfolk, which is where we served with FAST. So joined the YMCA. And that was where I was working out, and there was a trainer there who was from a Marine Corps family. And when he heard a couple of Marines joined, he was like, "Oh, I'll take you guys through your initial appointments and all that." Uh, I'm sure in part because he wanted to make sure we weren't going to be Marines can have a reputation for, being loud, boisterous, and troublesome. But he would talk about his brother and his dad that were in, and share stories, and want to hear about our enlistment and all that good stuff. And then there was one time when he was asking me about, like, what am I training for, right? Not just working
Yeah.
out. And he mentioned like 5Ks and 10Ks. And when I got out, dude, it again, was great experience for where I was and for me becoming the man I am, but it beat the shit out of my body. I could not squat. I could not run 50 yards without my knees hurt. So he was taking me through like assessing when does it hurt, take me through some movement assessments, and he's like, "Hey, do you want to be able to run again?" I was like, "Yeah, man, of course." But the doctor when I was checking out was like, "It'll be 30 or 35, and you'll have to have at least one or both knees replaced." And I just accepted that because the white coat said so.
Yeah, right.
And he was like, "All right, it doesn't have to be that way." He was the first person to teach me that like exercise and nutrition properly applied are regenerative therapies to increase your ability, not to restrict, not to just lose weight, not to, they are designed to increase your capabilities, make you more, whatever you want to be. Right.
Yeah.
And so, I worked with him as much as I could. He was, really generous in helping me out. And 3 months later, not pain free, but I could run 3 miles.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So I was like, I'm in. So I'd found a purpose. Like I need to help people understand what exercise truly is. It's not the Rocky montage where you beat the shit out of your body for an hour.
Yeah.
So
Right.
that got me into being a personal trainer. Right. And then quick funny story, how I met my wife. And I will remind you, it's 2025 as we're recording this. I met her in 2002. We started dating like of 3 or 4 or 5 like, in there, right? Is where our relationship got to get more serious. But the way we met in 2002 was she hired me to be her personal trainer. I
Okay.
trained her for a few months, left that gym, started working in another gym, and then we reconnected and started dating. So there's no like, crazy inappropriate crossover there. Just always like to stress that. Yeah. So, yeah. So, when we started dating, we were very much career and professionally focused people. And again, we'll never get married, never have kids. We just want to travel the world, build businesses, stuff like that. And then, we committed to each other that we were going to like live together. We were committed to each other. And then in 2011, we were just like, let's get married. And we didn't do a big show about it. I took a half day off work and we went down to the courthouse and got married on a Friday afternoon in Indianapolis. And our wedding picture,
Hey, that's where I live.
Yeah, I remember that. But our wedding picture is a selfie in the stairwell in the parking garage across the street from the courthouse, right? So,
Yeah.
yeah. But but then, a few years later, again, like 2016, we started talking about it. 2017, we started the pursuit of having kids, and that's wasn't. I don't know where you are with that, Colin, but it wasn't the easiest path. But I have 2 amazing kids now, a 6-year-old son, and my daughter's turning 4 this month.
Congrats.
Thank you. And I just, I'm, man, I would not trade anything for the life I have now. And I think back to this. I remember in high school, when I talked about the people saying, "Oh, take your summer," before you had like the thing I remember everybody saying, this is why I knew I needed to get out of Pittsburgh, was these are the best years of your life. High school is the best years of your life. And I just remember thinking like, so it's all downhill from here? Like,
Right.
this
I
isn't
hope
that
not.
great to begin with.
Yeah.
Right. So I feel so bad for those people who view life that way. Cause I got to be honest, like every era I've been through has been the best years of my life.
Yeah.
Right. Even like you look at resilience, real world resilience. That young man hit me with his dad's truck and fucked up his life worse than he did mine. Right?
Mm-hmm.
And then I talk about how my wife and I progressed together. We both, we started going to church after having kids because they are a crash course in theology for sure. But we both accepted Christ on December 28th this past year. Fully accepted. And then like even through that, I remember before I met my wife, when I was living in Norfolk, I was dating a girl, and we went to she went to Old Dominion University, and so we went to this Christ on Campus thing, and the pastor there did the thing at the end where you put your head down, and if you want to learn about Christ and accept Him, raise your hand. No one can see, and we'll pull you aside and we'll talk to you. And I was fully expecting to raise my hand. This pastor, who was overweight, decided to. I was one of the new guys there, and I was probably 10, 15 pounds more muscle than I have now. And he just decided to go off on this little tangent about, if you people who go in the gym and you're wasting your time, God doesn't care about that. It's all ego. You need to give your life to God and give up on the pursuit of improving your body. Well, not his exact words, but that was the message.
Yeah.
And I just remember thinking, like, all the shit I've been through, like the pursuit of strength has really helped me out. And I can't understand a God that will want me weaker.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I got to be honest, I've found that attitude a lot in the church, and I want it changed. I feel like that's part of my purpose here. And I will summarize it with the misunderstanding of Matthew 5:5, which is commonly quoted as the meek shall inherit the earth. I don't think meek is the right word. I've also seen it translated as the humble or the gentle shall inherit the earth. So to talk about how that gets put into play. When you're intoxicated and you hit a person with a vehicle in Texas, like I was hit, it is considered intent to kill, and it's a felony. So when my first night in the ICU, I can't stand. I can't lay with my wife. I can't do anything for anyone. I am useless. Of course, my attitude is, yeah, fuck that guy. Bury him under the prison. I do not care. But I was in there a week, and all you have to do, all you can do, is sit and think. And so I'm sitting there thinking, I'm trying to bring kids into this world, and this young man is a wrecking ball moving through the world. What happens if he goes to prison? Well, he suffers, and most likely, if he gets out, he is either a better or at least more effective criminal, right? What's a better option? So I've had deferred adjudication on tickets before. I drive fast, so I get tickets. And I go to court, and the judge says, take this course and you'll magically be a better driver, and we'll forget about that ticket. Cool. However that works. So when it came time for the hearing, and I got to meet with the assistant DA, I said, look, I've had deferred adjudication on tickets. What I would like to offer is deferred adjudication on this young man's felony status pending a successful 4-year enlistment Marine Corps infantry only, because that saved my life. Had I broken my leg, lost my leg, I don't think I would have been in the mindset to extend a grace to someone like that. That is another aspect of building whole life strength and resilience, and what it can do for you and how you can be of better service. I seek vengeance. Again, he hit me with his dad's truck, uninsured, right? So it's all my load to bear, and still fucked up his life worse than mine. Why would I seek vengeance on him? He needs help, right? Now, I was told it's unconstitutional. I still don't understand how giving someone a second chance through serving their country is unconstitutional. I don't get that. But at the sentencing, I gave him a copy of Jocko's book, Extreme Ownership. Told him, good luck. Stop being a wrecking ball moving through the world. There's more for you. And went on with my life.
I'm seeing, yeah, it's funny that you bring up Jocko's book. I haven't actually read that one, but I mean, just the title seems to kind of say it all.
Yeah.
I was going to say, I kind of hear a unifying theme in what you're sharing of there have been lots of opportunities in your life, and I think there's many opportunities in everyone's life to outsource ownership. And for whatever reason, and I think probably your grandfather's influence had a lot to do with it, based on what you shared. You have chosen at several like kind of key milestones in your life to take the ownership rather than outsource it. Would you say that's accurate? Is that fair?
Yeah. There's something very important to point out here is that I am not self-made. I am
Mhm.
incredibly lucky to have my wife, my circle of friends. When I sit down with clients, one of the first things I ask them about is their support system.
Mm-hmm.
But a key point there, and something I drive home with all of them, is you do not have a support system. You are part of a support system, right? So it's the difference between co-dependability and co-accountability, right? So I I I want to raise kids who are not strong and independent, strong and dependable.
Mm-hmm.
And they have a standard for the people who are in their lives. They hold them up to that standard and they help them get up to that standard. And
Right.
they expect those people to hold them to that standard as well. It is not outsourcing, right? But it is being part of a support system. Yeah. I think not outsourcing, you nailed it. That is the perfect way to put it. But it that can quickly turn into, well, then I need to be a strong, independent,
Sure.
whatever. And that's
Yeah, I
not
really
the
love
case.
that part of a support system instead of having a support system. I haven't heard anybody say it like that, but that makes a lot of sense. Because if you just say you need to have a support system, well, then you can think of yourself as being carried by a bunch of other people, and that's not a very empowering
Yeah, no,
position.
I came up with that a few years ago when I had a client who was having some problems and you know, he was wanting support without giving support. And that's a hard message to deliver to somebody, but once they understand, like, you have to take part in your own miracle, right? You
Mhm.
can't, it's the way you said it, you can't outsource it, right? You have to take ownership of it and collaborate with those who are on the same path. And that's how magic happens. The whole is greater than the sum of the parts, but it's up to you to hold the standard of who is part of that whole.
Mhm. Yeah, it's not it's not very inspiring or meaningful, at least in my experience and my understanding, to perceive yourself as being a burden to others. And so if it's like, I just, I want to have a support system. Well, if you imagine that as a bunch of people carrying you around, then you're literally a burden in that
Yeah,
case. And
literally.
so it's like, even if, you've talked about physical strength, even if you don't have physical strength, then it's not realistic to build up that much physical strength because some people seriously have conditions where it's like there's not a ton that they can do to get super strong. But even so, like everybody has ways to support other people, and so there's different ways to be strong.
So if you don't mind, can
Yeah.
we spend some time talking about strength?
Oh yeah, please.
So if you're going to explain strength to a 5 or 6 year old, how would you define it?
That's a good question. I just off the cuff, I tend to think of two kinds of strength. One would be the ability to move other things, and then the other one would be the ability to not be moved, which I would call like stability. So those are the two ways I think of strength.
That's solid. I like it because it's kind of a good platform for the definition that I've come up with is strength is the ability of a position or pattern to maintain its integrity under increasing stress or load,
Hmm.
right? So I love that you said to move or to not be moved, right? So the ability of a position to not be moved or pattern to move,
Hmm.
to maintain its integrity under increasing stress or load. So in the physical, we're talking about squat, hinge, push, pull,
Yeah.
lunge, carry. Um, but then that same definition we can overlay to your intellectual positions. Do they hold up to debate? Your political position. Let's not go down that rabbit hole. But your emotional state, right? Are you able to maintain and control your emotions, or are you going to easily fly off the handle? Your relationship, does it hold up to stress? And how do you increase strength in any of these? Well, you challenge them at an appropriate level. You don't push them to the point where they break. You push them to the point where they're stressed, and then and again, at the end of it, they're not stronger, they're weaker. During the recovery period is where they recover and get stronger, right? And you methodically plan that out and pursue it, checking those boxes. That's how you build whole life strength.
Yeah, the methodical planning of recovery. At least in my, I'm not someone who's in the gym per se a lot on jujitsu, but even when I used to be, I noticed when I'd be looking for training plans, what I would tend to find is here's what you do when you're in the gym. It's got the reps, it's got the sets, but what you were talking about is here's what you do outside the gym. And that's where you actually get strong, is outside the gym. You get weak in the gym on purpose, all right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I get weak in the gym on purpose. Yeah.
So we do have a few minutes left, and I did want to go back to, because I never feel like I fully got it. Like, what was driving the initial decisions to not get married, not have kids? And then what drove the change of heart or the change in direction?
The initial idea to not get married and have kids was largely hadn't had a good model of it. I had my grandparents, but then at some point, and just being 100% honest and transparent, I had to take ownership with that they had raised my dad, or I had to accept the idea that they had raised my dad. So there was something missing there, and I could tell you what it was. My grandfather drove a truck for the majority of his career, right? So he wasn't around a lot. So, but then as my wife and I grew in our relationship, we often found ourselves making friends with older people who had grown kids, and just seeing like what their lives were like, and hearing about the stories of them raising kids, and some of them watching them raise their kids, and then just thinking like, when we're gone, what's going to be the proof that we were here, right? And then I'm forgetting the passage, but the scripture that talks about a child being an arrow in your quiver, right? Which you can. So I've come up with a vision of my life that I am improving the trajectory of my bloodline. And that's what I want to do. And so I think about, to go back to that original story, like, I can't remember if I said this earlier, so I apologize. Forgive me if I'm repeating myself, but there is, an infinite spectrum between and beyond the 2 points of, at 11 years old, being dependable enough to be handed the keys to go deliver this across state lines, or, hey, you're troublesome, let's lock you up in this box. And I don't want them at either of those positions, let me be clear on that, but I do want them definitely closer to, I can count on this kid if I need something done. So, yeah, I see a need for raising strong, dependable sons and daughters, and I want to be part of that.
Yeah. So based on what you said with the arrow, and leaving did you use the word legacy, or did that just come into my head?
Legacy is a great way to put it. I said trajectory, but
Yeah.
legacy is spot on.
Yeah. So you said originally you weren't thinking of doing that because you didn't have a model, because you realized that your grandfather raised your father, who, based on what you said, it wasn't a model for you. Did you find a model?
Several.
Okay.
My grandfather was definitely, part of it. The teacher I spoke about earlier,
Okay.
The guys the men I served under in the Marine Corps, I remember there's one man, when I was under his command, I was like, fuck this guy. Da, da, da. Why is he so hard on me? You know, all the stupid little immature stuff. And a few years ago, you know, way back, you know, we became friends on Facebook. But then after my son was born, I messaged him and I was like, hey, I'm sorry for every problem I ever caused you. Like, I just want you to know, like, the stuff you were drilling into my head, it's stuck. I still, you know, I was thinking about it, especially now that I have kids, da, da, da. And he was like, just under his command, man, he was mean. He was mean. And this was, again, this is probably 2020, maybe 2019. He called me. I didn't know you could call through Facebook. He called me, and he was like on the other side of the planet, and it was just his voice, but not in the way I expected, right? I just knew him to bark, and he was like, hey, man, thank you so much for that. It's great to hear. I'm glad. I see your pictures on Facebook. I see your family. I'm glad you're doing well. And I've got to hang out with him since, and it's just absolutely amazing. Mentors I've had in the fitness industry. But you know, I books I've read, I'm writing one now, reviewing my own life. It's, you know, of course, in, you know, following Christ in the Bible. I have, just like I talked about when I was in Pittsburgh, there's no shortage of opportunities. I'm just every day growing and being able to see them more and more.
Mm-hmm. So with these last couple minutes, I've heard quite a few different people say things along the lines of, well, I don't want to bring kids into this messed up world. And I'd be curious to hear what you would say to people who are in that frame of mind.
I mean, there's part of me that would want to say, then don't, because if that's the mindset you're in, and I only have 10 seconds to talk to you, I don't know if I'm going to be able to change your mind, right? So if that's all the time I got, don't. If I have a little bit more time, I might say, well, fix yourself, right? Because you can't fix the world, but you can fix yourself, and then you can raise a kid who can maybe have a little bit more of an impact on the world. And then I would also say, okay, well, what are you doing for the kids that are already in this world, right? Like you agree it's messed up, so are you just going to say, okay, well, they can deal with it, right? We can go to Gandhi's quote, be the change you want to see in the world. You can sit and bitch. If I'm talking to grown adults and you're going to bitch about everything that's wrong, I'll give you a couple minutes to do that. Then what? What are we going to do? Because I'm not going to sit and listen to you bitch anymore. I've given you your couple of minutes. Now what? I'm not interested in sitting and talking about everything that's wrong or whose fault it is. Because once we establish what's wrong, it is pointless to talk about whose fault it is unless we want to get them involved in the solution. But the next thing we need to talk about is whose responsibility is it to fix it? And we can't take responsibility for everything, but what can we take responsibility for? And then let's do it. And if they aren't in for that, then don't.
Thank you for sharing that.
No problem, man. Thank you.
If people want to connect with you, are you open to that? And how might they do that, if so?
Absolutely. So Brandon Mancine Fitness is the name of my company. So BMF Coaching is the easiest way to find me on Instagram. I also have Coach Brandon Mancine, and another Instagram is A Real Life Wolverine. So I've got those three: Coach Brandon Mancine, BMF Coach, and A Real Life Wolverine on Instagram. My website is bmfcoaching.com. I've got a lot of freebies on there. I don't know when this is coming out, but right now I have a metabolic quiz on there, a 5-day bulletproof core challenge, some other. I'm always putting different ebooks and stuff up on there. But yeah.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Brandon. I feel a little stronger after talking to you. So
thank you, sir. I appreciate your time, Collin, man. This has been great. Thank you so much.
The Superhuman Academy podcast is hosted by Collin Jewett and designed and edited by Army Cinco. with original music by Joshua Schunig and voiceovers by Corey Page Schunig. That's me. You can find past episodes and resources, as well as access to the ever-growing Superhuman Academy community at superhumanacademy.com. If you like the show, don't forget to subscribe and leave us a review on your podcast platform of choice.